What is the biggest threat for bankers? COVID-19 or hackers? From ATM to internet banking, and everything is at risk. In the era where bankers are working from home, how are they making sure that hackers are away from banks? In our next panel discussion, risk heads of the bank will share their secret weapons. And I would like to invite Yashwendra Singh, editor ETCIO, to take this conversation ahead and ask the insightful questions from our panelists.
Hello viewers, I'm Yashwendra Singh, Executive Editor of ETCIO and the moderator of this session themed Relooking at Unknown Risks and Threats, which I'm sure is something that is right on top of the mind of cybersecurity leaders right now. The pandemic has created an enormous challenge for businesses worldwide. To continue operating despite massive shutdowns of offices and other facilities is a humongous task. Overnight, the demands placed on the digital infrastructure have skyrocketed. At the same time, digital also becomes a much bigger and more lucrative target for cybercriminals. Cybersecurity efforts, therefore, need to be upgraded to prevent a second crisis from emerging on the digital devices and networks that have become infinitely more vital to companies. In this panel discussion today, we have top cybersecurity leaders who will reveal strategies to stay a step ahead of unknown risks and threats in a world redefined by the COVID-19 pandemic. Please join me in welcoming, in alphabetical order, Mr. Akhil Verma, CISO Airtel Payments Bank, Mr. Deval Mazmudar, CISO IndusInd Bank, Mr. Mathan Babu Kasilingam, CISO MPCI, Mr. Stephen Hunter, Senior Director System Engineering APJ, Scout Technologies, and Mr. Vijay Jayaraman, Director System Engineering Citrix India. Welcome, gentlemen. So I'll open up the discussion with Mr. Akhil. Akhil, there's been a significant rise in the number of phishing mails, ransomware, malware, all connected to COVID-19. How can BFSI cybersecurity leaders proactively secure their organizations against such threats? According to a report, I'll just throw some numbers at you. According to a recent report, the COVID-19 related phishing attacks have gone up by as much as 667% since the end of February. Just to put things in context. Your take on this?
So it's a very apt question, and during this current scenario, one thing I want to go one step back before this COVID scenario. It was always, you can say it was always threat. It's like a social engineering. It's always a problem for any organization, any CISO, any cybersecurity person. But yeah, because it's a link with the user's emotions. Because whenever any intruder means any attackers and they are just playing with the user emotions and they want to trick them, they want to do something, okay, the user should click it or submit their credential. COVID, definitely it has created a major impact on the entire world. It's not like any country or something, entire world it has created. So here people it's emotionally, mentally and financially, job related and everywhere it is affected. Now the attackers are doing this as they are playing this trick and they are making this particular scenario as a weapons for them. Definitely it's as you mentioned that 667% increase are there. A lot of emails are coming where users are falling prey. So my take on this, it's as usual, whatever we are telling, it's a back to basic. Always it's pointing it to the user awareness. As much as technology solution, definitely it's required and we have to fine tune a lot of things. But it is going back to the user awareness. If all the state of all technology, if everything, if we are using, we are tightening our spam filter and all these rules. But still, if a user is doing any one mistake, then it's done for the organization. So I think for me, it's basically like as a CISO, we should definitely earlier also we were doing, but now to take that lesson from this particular scenario, we have to enhance that of a periodicity, like many drills, awareness related, and it should be like a quantitative basis. We have to check, okay, suppose I am having 100 employees, how many fall prey on this particular, whenever I am just putting that drill, okay, I'll be having some figure. It could be any starting organization or any little bit mature or highly mature organization. It will be like starting some 20%, 50% people fall prey. After that awareness, then after that next drill. So that basis, if we are continuously, we are taking as a journey, again, we can just because it's a very qualitative type of thing. How many people will fall prey, we don't know. So this will create as a perfect data. This will give that status posture of our organization, how much we are ready. If anybody trying to trick our organization and want to take this thing. So I think it's just as a single answer, I think it's a user awareness. It's a main kick for this.
User awareness, that's really critical. Also that you touched upon social engineering. So leveraging current or topical events in social engineering strategies is not a new tactic used by cyber criminals.
Yeah.
But because of the unpredictability of the pandemic, cyber criminals are using the virus, as a bait to play into people's worry, anxiety, and perhaps lower security during this time. That's what I feel. Mr. Deval, what's your take on this?
Yeah, sure. I think everything said by Akhil is absolutely right. There is a lot of anxiety. There is a lot of curiosity. You receive some mail, you receive some SMS. Let me just have a look at that. It's something interesting facts about the numbers. I really wonder, how does it really going to make a difference to individual's life if the number goes high by 10% or 5%? But then that is what the fraudsters, they are actually, really benefiting from people's curiosity. So one is the fear, and the other is the curiosity. While employee awareness is definitely very, very important, while Akhil has already spoken so much about it, I'll not touch upon that. I would say that we need to have tools and processes in place such that even if the users, they kind of fall prey for such attacks, they click on some URL, they open some attachments, we should try our best to implement the tools and technologies to prevent the damage it might cause, the malware it might carry, and basically try and minimize the impact of that. Immediately, try to figure out what might go wrong and see the impact of, let's say, in an organization you receive a phishing mail. One person reports, you immediately go and identify how many users might have received and warn them, and looking at the IOCs, try to immediately implement the controls on the perimeter as well as the endpoints, so that further damage, if at all, can be prevented. Yes, I think it's always the fear factor and the curiosity that the malicious actors will try to leverage to phish the end users. But then we, apart from the awareness, we need to have the proper controls at various levels in the various layers in the organization network to prevent further damage from such.
Sure. Coming to you, Stephen, we've heard Akhil talk about the importance of awareness. They were touched upon the importance of technology. So, basically people, process, technology. Your thoughts on this?
I guess I'm representing the technology here, but I will echo actually what Akhil and Deval have actually just said, in that I've had multiple CISOs in conferences and one-on-one tell me that the most valuable spend, the quickest ROI in some of their security projects has been around user awareness. And even at ForceGap, my CISO is regularly doing user awareness drills on the security staff like myself. And the sophistication of those phishing emails is getting ever more tempting to click on. But to Deval's point, that we should assume breach, right? It's just simply a law of large numbers that at some point one of your users will click on that email and the malware will get executed and downloaded. And that's really where the technology part of this comes in. And where I think something that was very important that Deval mentioned, which is the role of technology and the role of security architecture is to limit the impact of that eventual breach. Let's assume that we will be breached, and by containing the blast radius, by limiting the privilege that the users have, that limits the damage that they can do. But one comment I'll make on the technology side is, it's very rarely that it is the well-managed, well-understood asset that the attackers end up residing on. So the spear phishing might be the insertion, that's the penetration to the organization, but how the attackers linger and persist inside the organization is often by moving laterally to something they can get access to that is not so well protected, that maybe hasn't been well identified. And we have numerous cases of that with customers where the initial penetration was a targeted spear phishing email, but then the persistence and the data exfiltration and the long-term campaign was on poorly managed assets within the organization. And so there's an element of understanding what you have, which is a baseline to all security that we need to address as a foundation.
Vijay, what's your take on this?
Sure, and I think all the panel did mention user awareness as a critical point here. That is something that our CISO within Citrix, of course, does, and it's all about the user, right? When you talk about phishing, when you talk about attacks like this, we are talking of vulnerabilities at the user level, at the human behavior level, which are really the vector for an attack into the organization, right? Simulations, games, user awareness becomes a big part of reducing the probability, right? It is 1 out of 1,000 is going to click that link, right? 1 out of 1,000 is going to go into a different site, which may not necessarily be safe, right? So the organization has to be prepared for that and mitigate those things, right? So we are talking two aspects here. One is the human aspect. Second is the devices. As far as devices are concerned, especially when in a pandemic like this, when many of the organizations which were never used to working from home, right? And the banks are obviously a big part of that because conservative, traditional, they've been forced to move and work from homes, right? And it's a very different security connotation there where sometimes you have corporate assets, right, which are heavily protected with lots of agents, 15 different agents controlling different things. But how do you get a 100,000 people organization, 50,000 people organization, 10,000 people organization, ship all the assets home? So it's a very difficult task. And I'm talking very logistical, very practical on the ground. So some of the organizations have gone ahead and said that, okay, let me do a quasi BYOD for some of the users, right? Control which endpoints are coming in, but still allow bring your own devices for some of the users. So how do you segregate that, containerize that sort of traffic from these sort of devices from affecting the corporate resources, right? That's a key part of what the CISOs are dealing with here. One of the things that we've been espousing to the market is this concept of secure digital workspaces, where we're saying that containerize your enterprise environments within the BYOD environment so that the browsing habits of an individual does not affect the larger enterprise itself, right? We are talking of, if it's a 10,000 user organization, close to 10,000 users working out of homes, 10,000 different attack points there, right? So it's a humongous task. I don't envy the task of a CISO here, definitely, right? And as I said, it's all about the endpoints, protecting the endpoints, educating the users, and that's primarily what we're also espousing to the market.
So you talked about work from home. This is something really crucial, really top of the mind for all CISOs today. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. So I'll come to Akhil, back to you. So Akhil, we've seen that, there's a distributed enterprise model today, and it is going to continue for some time to come. In fact, for some companies, this will be a new normal forever. We've just heard the $4 billion RPG group announcing permanent work from home policy. But because of this, a large number of employees working from home, the threat surface of an enterprise definitely increases manifold. So in such a scenario, how can CISOs ensure security, business continuity, and productivity of their organizations?
First of all, I think it's not a new normal, it's no normal, because already we have crossed the 6-month time period. Everybody is very used to do that for. So means definitely some organizations might have faced a lot of issues, some might be mid-level issue. But now some of the other way, everybody is adjusted, and it is going to be the continuation. Maybe some hybrid mode it will come or something, whatever you are mentioning means some organization completely. So now the thing is, biggest issue is with the information security fraternity. Earlier it was there, we have to protect the assets which we consider as a crown jewel, and it is situated in the data center, or some of my endpoint, which 99% people are connecting within an organization premises only. It's rarely only some people are going outside and they may be accessing only hardly mail or something. But now a lot of infrastructure it is exposed. It could be through VPN or VDI or something. But now our threat landscape, it has been completely, it's a change. So I think here concept it is coming as a zero trust. So the thing is, whenever it's coming from the outside, and first thing I'm talking about any zero trust technology. First thing I want to here emphasize on the zero trust framework. And the thing is here, as an organization side, means we should focus and we should give our employee confidence. It's not like we are not trusting you. It's like we are investing something or we are doing something which protect you to not doing something wrong. So on that concept, it should be. It's not like, okay, I'm not trusting any employee, I'm not trusting. Because it could be like Vijay also mentioned, clicking of any link, it could be 1 out of 1,000 possibility. So a mistake, it could be very rarely. But if any one mistake, and that it is such a big thing, it could be catastrophic for the organization. So yeah, so here it should come as a zero trust framework. Now the thing is, whatever means, if I am working from home, it's a definitely could be organization device, but I am connecting from my network. That is my home network. Now home network, this getting scanned with the multiple papers. My neighbors also maybe means they will be having that reach out. It's an attack surface that tremendously change, completely change. So now we have to just look upon all these attack surfaces and accordingly we have to implement. Now if any traffic, it could be from the zero trust perspective, if anything it is coming from like any IP address, it could be from any geography, any devices, any user authentication. All these things now we have to filter. We should be in a position to adopt that technology, and mostly it's done, and people are in a migration phase also, people are doing. So we should be filtering all those things, and then only we should allow any user or any system or any network to come into our network. So that is.
Sure, Akhil, definitely. Like you said, zero trust frameworks, zero trust models. We are not anything new, but suddenly they've become this flavor of this season.
Exactly.
Great inputs there. They will. For a bank, work from home, complete no. Is it giving you sleepless nights now as a CISO? What will be your strategy to counter this?
No, well, actually, I consider that as a part of the BCP. If even if it is, let's say, a local, some geographical disturbance or any other type of disturbance, it has forced people, or actually it has prevented people from coming to work. They have been forced to work from home. So I think while most of us, they say that this is a new normal, which is already become a normal, I still consider this as a continuing BCP, which will take quite a lot of time to actually stabilize and actually reach a normal. Okay, because there are challenges. There are definitely challenges. People have lived up to the expectations. Technology people, business people, every individual, they have adjusted. They have adapted to this environment and the situation. They have met the need of the hour, and they have delivered. But that doesn't make it automatically a new normal, because people know what are the challenges. Now coming to the actual security challenges, when people start working from home, suddenly earlier, you might have about 5 to 10% of critical staff who might be provided remote access to the organization's resources for support purpose, for troubleshooting purpose, or for some critical activities. Now suddenly, one fine day, you expand that to, if not 100%, let's say 40%, 50% of the staff that is identified as critical to the business, right? I mean, business will always be at the priority, because they need to continue serving. That one, apart from the limitations, the technology limitations that you already have in place, it is also a security challenge, because now suddenly, you have those endpoints which were earlier within the boundaries of the organization, which were well defined, which was more or less static. So only about 5 to 10% of the assets were moving outside the boundary and connecting from out. Now you suddenly have like 50% of the assets going out. So your perimeter is increased, and not only increased, it is no longer static. It's kind of a variable. It's dynamic. People might log in at 2 o'clock in the night. Somebody might log in at 4 o'clock in the night. You need to monitor the VPN, understand from where it is coming, at what time it is coming, for how long to keep it active. If it is inactive, how long to keep the session active. So suddenly there are new set of challenges. So it is certainly a scenario which is difficult, but then to meet the business requirement, again, I'm saying, as part of the BCP, we have to ensure that we continue to provide secured access to the critical staff. So the focus now should shift to the endpoints, as the perimeter is shifted to the endpoints. So the focus now shift to the endpoints, and people, when I say people, the users have to be constantly reminded and educated on the do's and don'ts of not just phishing, but the other issues of work from home, privacy issues, there are confidentiality issues. There are other non-security related issues about the physical handling of the assets, which may actually have an impact on the availability. Primarily designed for in-premise management. For example, patching. Now, if you have Microsoft machines and you're using SCCM, you have a setup that would patch the machines once the asset is inside the network. Even if a laptop user, the laptop user will come back, and when it connects to the network, it will get patched. Suddenly, you need to extend that patching feature over the internet to the external perimeter. Right. Similarly, the endpoint security solutions, the NAC solution that we have, basically to ensure that the security posture of all company-owned assets, they remain within the compliance levels and they provide continuing security. You need to re-engineer and redesign, or maybe do sometimes minor tweaking, sometimes major tweaking of solutions. Sometimes we may have to also go out and actually go for cloud-based solutions, because those are the most appropriate solutions designed for this kind of environment. It may not be possible for the organizations to shift to cloud-based solutions from on-premise solutions overnight. But then if this remains to be consistent and ultimately, yes, it becomes a new normal, then yes, it will definitely move organizations to start looking at solutions which are more native to the cloud. So that's all I wanted to say.
Sure, Mr. Deval. Stephen, there are no two ways about the fact that for an enterprise, the data has left the data center and the users have left the network. So how can a CISO stay on top of this trend? Just Mr. Deval just said, a CISO would have to focus on the endpoints. What do you think would be the best strategy for a CISO to adopt in such a situation?
Well, I think actually what Akhil and Deval have both quite eloquently described is the changing nature of the enterprise. So at Forescout, we've always talked about the enterprise being the extended enterprise. So it's, those things on the campus and those things in the data center and those things in the cloud. And for non-FSI, those things in the operational technology world. All of those things have a set of characteristics that we need to identify. We need to discover them. We need to classify them, assess them, and secure them. What we've sort of highlighted now is we have this other part of the extended enterprise that is now in essentially every user's home. So the home has become a part of the extended enterprise that is now the responsibility of the CISO and the security function of an enterprise to take into consideration when it comes to assessing risk. Now, that may not mean secure, but it does mean being risk aware of those environments. And you'll hear sort of from Forescout over the next 6 months, we talk very much about being the company that is trying to help security organizations actively defend their enterprise of things. And the reason we talk like that is because we recognize that the enterprise landscape is now everything you had, everything that's in the data center, everything in the cloud, and now it's some composite of people's homes as well. And working from home, as Akhil said before, it's not a new thing, right? So not only is it not the new normal because we've been doing it for 6 months, but it wasn't the new normal before. As Deval said, there's always been some percentage of people that we've given remote access to. We've had VPNs for 20 years. The thing that's changed in the last 6 months, there's a couple of dimensions. Number one is scale. So the quantity of people that are working from home has dramatically increased. The type of work that they're doing has dramatically changed too. So customers that I've worked with, we're helping them secure or enable access to classified networks from home that would have historically require you to be inside a particular physical security level of a facility. But, people are in lockdown, and that's a government policy, so you can't avoid it. So, and in banking and finance, we're seeing transactions being authorized from home with executive officers of the banks that would have been unheard of just 6 or 12 months ago. That tells us that that's a part of our extended enterprise that we're going to have to assess moving forward. And a question that I'll kind of pose the watchers of this broadcast would be, the device that I've well secured in the enterprise that I've permitted the employee to take home, and hopefully it stays patched and we're able to keep an eye on it from a compliance perspective, and there's work in play to make that possible. But if that was in my home where I have, open access and very noisy neighbors, and I have about 35 different devices on my home network with Alexas and Google Chromes and my daughter's, iPads and everything like that, is that device more risky or less risky than that same device in Deval's network, where he has a separate network with only perhaps a corporate provided printer on that home network? So this concept of external risk in an unmanaged environment is something I think we need to bring into the assessment of risk overall when it comes to endpoints and devices. The good news, I think, is that not only are we hearing straight from the CISOs that they already understand this, but the industry is kind of coalescing around a fairly standard approach to thinking about things like zero trust. You know, that was historically a little bit vendor co-opted. Well, now, you know, August 2020, NIST have standardized their approach to zero trust architecture with 800.207. And that gives us all a vendor neutral way of talking about zero trust architecture, zero trust capability, zero trust framework, which I think we can use to help answer the question, how do we approach securing this extended enterprise of many different types of things now that this is the new normal moving forward?
Sure, Stephen. And we'll look forward to those announcements from ForScout that will help CISOs secure their crown jewels even better. Moving to you, Vijay. Would you like to add to what the panelists just said?
Akhil, Stephen, as well as they will covered, I think, a fair bit of conundrums around work from home, people, organizations sitting on the fence on cloud and multi-cloud and things like that, moving on to that side of the house. The moment you saw supply chains getting a little tighter, delivery of compute and storage and elements like that getting a little tougher, right? We saw organizations moving on to a cloud or getting services from the cloud, right? So when you look at this issue holistically, I'm not seeing an issue, it's just a situation. We're looking at work from home, we're looking at things around multi-clouds, we are looking at data being residing everywhere, right? OneDrive, Google Drive, on-prem data center hosted shares and things like that. We're also talking about a lot of applications speaking to each other, right? An example could be NPCI with UPI, right? It's got so many open interfaces, and I'm sure that's true for all of the banks that have to speak to other elements to really close transactions, right? You're talking open APIs. So there are a lot of areas to consider here. One is the devices. The second is what runs within your data center and how do you protect. Also, we're trying to, again, tell our customers, the banks in specific, protect your devices, whether it's BYOD, whether it is company-owned assets, right? Zero trust, trust no one, authenticate everything, authorize everything, right? Expect the worst, right? As far as devices are concerned, everything, right from if it's a BYOD, how do you prevent key logging from happening, right? In a device that does not belong to an enterprise? How do you containerize enterprise data within that third-party device, right? From an application point of view, also, again, without applications, businesses don't run. And 92% or more of vulnerabilities that are there are not on the devices, it's on the application side, right? It is because of the way developers code, because faster to market and things like that, right? How do you protect that again against bots accessing instead of actual users? So customers and CISOs and security practitioners and folks like us have to look at this a little holistically when we talk of zero trust, and ultimately monitoring and quantifying all that at every stage of access of a device or the user to an asset. How do you paint that single picture that the entire organization can view and the CISO can present to the risk organization or the CEO, that this is what the security profile for the entire organization is, right? Look at it a little bit more holistically. I think things around work from home, things around multi-cloud, I think these are all point in time situations that they are, but I think looking at it from a slightly wider angle really gives a different perspective.
Sure, Vijay. So you talked about cloud there. Mr. Deval, while cloud was already finding traction in enterprises, the pandemic, I feel, has accelerated its adoption. And I guess it's a logical move as well, because companies want to cut costs, they want to enhance their agility and efficiency. But somewhere in this hurry, in this haste, I feel they could have ignored the aspect of cybersecurity. What according to you is the best strategy for ensuring security of data in a multi-cloud environment?
I would say regardless of the location, the data protection tools and the processes that are implemented in the organization, as per the baseline standards that are adopted by the organization should stick to that. Maybe you map it to a different set of tools, tweak your processes based on the location of your data and your applications as you migrate to cloud from on-premise. There will certainly be some changes. If someone thinks that once you move it to the cloud, the responsibility of security is with a cloud service provider, that's not true. And we must ensure that depending on the model that we adopted, the agreement that we have with the cloud service provider, what is the organization's responsibility and what is the cloud service provider's responsibility in terms of ensuring the security. The tools which I mentioned earlier also, which are native to the cloud, which are designed from the perspective of managing security in the cloud. There are technologies which actually are available only in the cloud. So you can't really protect using or extending or your on-premise tools to the cloud. So this is certainly an aspect that that organizations must consider, map to their on-premise security standards, and ensure that the baseline standards are always extended. For example, access controls. It varies how you implement and how you manage, but the principles of ensuring the access controls, the need-to-know basis, principles of encryption and data protection, these, as per the organization policy, they all still hold true. It's just the implementation will change, the way it is managed, that will change, and the way it is monitored, that will change. So I think it's just an extension of the approach of from on-prem to the cloud. There are changes that the organization should be aware of and cognizant of, and they must adopt the changes while moving to the cloud.
Akhil, do you echo Mr. Deval's sentiments there? Just a change of approach, migrating from on-prem to the cloud?
Very true. And here I want to highlight the some beautiful quality of human nature. Okay, here what we are thinking means, as a human nature, we are thinking whatever we can touch, whatever we can see, or whatever we can directly visualize, or it's in our control, that only we can protect. And second quality is there, at least in a professional life, if we have outsourced everything, then now it's not my responsibility. I will just hold that other person responsible, and whatever my agreement is saying and penalty clause, all those SL and all those. No, I am totally away from that. So Mr. Deval perfectly he mentioned. The thing is, whatever we are mentioning, whatever we are opting as a baseline control for our own organizations, which we are used to, we are doing from the decades, is all the organization. Same things we have to go ahead and implement in the cloud also. It could be the back to basic type of thing, least privileges, segregation of duty, access control, and all these information security concepts. It should be combination of the administrative controls. It should be combinations of the technical control. Means when we are talking about the administrative, it could be like, okay, right to audit, some agreement basis, all those things it can be mentioned. But the technical control, it's as good as same whatever we are implementing, and accordingly we have to proceed. Second thing, in this era, what I'm thinking, it's one thing is there, which is again means my first question as a user awareness. Here it's coming as a user skill set. So if I am maintaining, if any organization is going for the any cloud adoption, after that we have to see, okay, we should have a right skill. We should train our people, and accordingly configuration is our part. Cloud services providers, they are going to provide us just one a particular space. Okay, here you can dump or you can keep your data, but configuration is our part. How we are going to configure, how we are going to access. It's not like their responsibility. So I think based on just back in mind those things only, if we are going ahead, so it's nothing anything separate than our on-prem or the cloud side thing. Those things we have to do.
Yeah, I guess one fully agree with both perspectives as well, and I think one of the pleasures of working with the FSI sector is that this push to cloud from the consumer side or from the user side has not been so aggressive. So I still see very strong use of VPN in the banking sector. Where cloud is obviously very well adopted and was early adopted by FSI is more on the infrastructure side. It is the cloud compute piece. It is multi-cloud in that sense. And where I've seen other organizations change how they've used cloud as people have moved away from the office. For example, if you're using Office 365 and you're using that on premise and you're doing a certain set of controls with the endpoints that you have on premise, and you're able to make access control decisions because those devices are on premise. Well, when they move off premise and they're in the home now, if you weren't in a bank and you weren't VPNing, you're now accessing your corporate data without coming through any kind of technical controls in the bank. But I think my key takeaway that I would like to reiterate is actually from Deval, where he says, really the enforcement is the thing that's different. The decision-making around a policy for whether you permit or deny access is consistent, right? And that should be consistent across the extended enterprise. So that the policy decision point and the policy decision process should be consistent regardless of whether there's suddenly something new that has popped up. How we enforce that decision, whether it's an administrative control or a new technical control, is the only thing that changes, but the policy remains consistent. And we've been here before. We were here in 2007 when Apple came out with the iDevices, the iPhone, and then suddenly we were forced as IT providers to permit these devices that we had no plans to permit into our corporate network. And we solved that with a combination of consistent policy, but then some new controls around mobile device management. And it will be the same for this work from home scenario.
Vijay, I read a recent report from the Korean investment bank, Mirae Asset, which estimated that China's public cloud spending would grow 58% in 2020 to roughly $19 billion US. And this is attributed to the pandemic. And as we know, cloud and security go hand in hand. Your take on this, Vijay?
True, and I wouldn't say it. Some of the movement towards cloud has been forced, but it is something that is horses for courses, right? And many of the organizations found it far more easier to get into a multi-cloud environment at this time, while there was always a plan to do so, right? So that inertia element just went away, right? But what we in Citrix are trying to do is make it easier for enterprises to adopt a multi-cloud environment, right? No matter what service you adopt from Citrix, whether it is application delivery, whether it is end user side technologies, whether you use it content collaboration, right? So any of these, we try to make it the same, whether it is on-prem or whether it is multi-cloud, right? Whether it is in terms of technology, whether it is in terms of licensing, right? So consumption should never be an issue, no matter where the workload or whether the service resides. So in that sense, make it easy. So like Akhil and Devalas mentioned that it is not only about having infrastructure there and we actually going and deploying stuff, right? There's a learning curve attached to it, right? You need to have people certified for that sort of environments. So we try to sort of abstract that thing, make it easy for enterprises to adopt these. And obviously, as far as multi-cloud is concerned, even for services within Citrix, we are seeing that adoption of cloud subscriptions has far outpaced what is on-prem, right? And that is true for some of the organizations like banking, which traditionally have all their assets under their control, where they can see and look and feel. So we're seeing that change slowly, moving into a sort of a subscription environment where enterprises are comfortable to go and adopt services for a specific time frame rather than going with it stock and barrel, right? So that's the sort of movement that we are seeing. And everything that you mentioned about the growth in clouds, we are seeing the platform that we are using right here declared results yesterday, right? We're seeing adoption in such cloud technologies, right? So it is there, and I think all of us are aware of it, and we are trying to make it easier for this adoption to take place here.
Stephen, earlier during the discussion, you talked about building resiliency within an organization. So we all know that it's really tough for any organization to be 100% secure. It's said that every organization would get breached. It's just a matter of time. And that's the reason why a hacker is in business, right? So, but like you mentioned, it's really critical to build resiliency in your infrastructure. So how can BFSI CISOs build resiliency into their structure? That's my question to you, Stephen.
So I think certainly taking an approach which doesn't start with point solutions is a great initial approach. So as we look at building out security capabilities and building resilient security capabilities for an enterprise, what we want to maximize is the amount of security coverage that we're able to get from our investment across all of the environments that I need to protect. And so, to Deval's point before, we've sort of fallen into this, business continuity world where we've suddenly had mass, BCR environments happening. And if we had invested in a point solution that was limited to just this part of my enterprise, well, now I've got to go and rebuild or acquire some new capability for this other part of my, my BCP enterprise. And so that's not resilient in and of itself. So taking an enterprise-wide view of essential capabilities, I think is foundational for resilience from a security perspective. And if I think of just sort of two examples of this, and it's almost the lip service that we pay to this insecurity, but we should care about more. You know, the RBI back in 2011 with their cybersecurity framework, when it originally came out, had a very small section in it stating that we want to be doing things like asset discovery and asset inventory, because a comprehensive asset inventory is an important thing. Then in 2016, when they put out the refresh, they highlighted that just a little bit more, but still was not significantly called out. So we have assumed that we have comprehensive foundational knowledge of all of the assets, both devices and data assets in our enterprise that we need to protect. And then December, just 6 months ago, for the was it the UCBs, I think it was, they made the RBI made a very explicit 4 annex level description of capabilities for security, and they were very specific in calling out, even if you're an annex level 2 UCB, you know, you must have a real-time and continuous capability for doing asset discovery and asset classification. And if you're an asset level 3, i.e. you're integrating with the Swift environment, you must have not only that, but you must have an enterprise-wide ability to determine what network behavior is good and what network behavior is bad. So that evolution, you know, we assumed that capability was there almost 10 years ago, and it's been in the standards and the frameworks forever. But my kind of close on this point around how do I work with security departments around building resilient infrastructures related to what it is that FORSCAT does? I start by looking at the entire enterprise and the foundational capability around visibility and control, and then ultimately enforcement, which might be point network unique. But the visibility and the policy piece should be pan-enterprise, and that's where we start for enterprise security resilience.
Vijay, what are your thoughts on this?
Security is a catch-up game, right? Ultimately, it is a matter of time and when, right? And the entire the aim of the industry and the consumers of these solutions is primarily to reduce the time to repair, right? At some point of time, just a couple of years back, it used to take 200 days for a breach to be detected, right? So the entire effort has been to reduce that 200 days to closer towards 100 and lower, right? So that the financial ramifications of the breach reduces, right? So that's what the entire efforts of the industry has been, right? With all the controls around devices, with things around monitoring, with things around knowing what your applications are doing, right? But ultimately, we have to look at it holistically, where one part of the system, like Steve also mentioned, is able to speak to the other part of the system and be able to present a single view, right, when a CISO looks at it. Now, a big part of how soon a breach can be detected is very dependent on automation, right? One has to use AI capabilities, ML capabilities that are available to ensure that events are correlated and you know exactly what's happening where. Automation of enforcement of actions based on what's happening, right? Ultimately, a breach leaves fingerprints. It is just on the systems to find where the fingerprint is and who does it match to. So as a close, this is what I'm saying, right, is look at the problem holistically, right? Look at things around monitoring, look at things around AI and ML, which encompasses the entire solution space, so that the organization has a singular view of everything, right? It makes detection of issues faster. It makes fingerprinting and getting that fingerprint correlated to a person much faster, right? And I think that's also what our CISOs in the industries are trying to do.
So, gentlemen, we are fast running out of time. So, one final question to all of you before we wrap up the session. I'll start with you, Akhil. There's so much action happening in the cybersecurity space right now. So many new trends emerging that will eventually impact the role of a CISO. So going forward, how do you see the role of the CISO changing, and what should a CISO do to stay relevant and aligned with the new normal?
So in my view, it's now it should be, and already it's started. That shift has started. Means more from the compliance perspective, CISO's role, it should be enabled with it should be look as a business enabler. Because during this pandemic, whatever the IT profession and the security professionals have managed this thing, so ultimately it's just like keeping the lights on for the organization. So ultimately, because of all these IT infrastructure and the strong security, any organization business is running. So going forward also means all these business use cases, okay, because it's not like earlier only we are just putting that investment. We are asking one solution implementation and we are going to the board and just putting. And after that, we are not in a position to provide some ROI. Now, at least all those things, whatever it's a learning we have got during this pandemic and earlier before that, but definitely it's a great lessons for everyone. All those things should be just hand in hand with the business and it should be think as a business enabler.
Well said. Mr. Deval.
Yeah, I agree with Akhil. And I'd like to add is since the security is now moving much closer to the other teams like business and operations and IT, for example, DevSecOps, okay, it's no longer a separate security. So I think now CISO role is moving towards more of a strategic than remaining tied up with the operational aspects. A combination of strategic and the risk, because ultimately, it's the risk that has to be managed. It's a cyber risk that has to be managed for the organization. So the CISO role will more evolve towards these two focus areas, that is managing the risk for the organization, as well as forming strategies, as Akhil said, with business to enable business initiatives, which are more and more digital these days.
Stephen, do you agree with him? The CISO role changing from being operational to moving towards strategic?
I would almost say not moving away. The challenge with the role is you never move entirely away from the operational, but certainly, the CISO role, as I've seen CISOs evolve over the last sort of 15 years, number one, I am somewhat in awe of the responsibilities and the diverse nature of the role, from technical operations, from the risk side, but also increasingly, as both Akhil and Deval said, it is an innovation role. We used to have the digital transformation officers kind of coming out that were coming up with the great application ideas. Well, security is so deeply entwined in end user trust with our organizations. The CISO is ultimately playing that business enabling innovation role in handling the most trusted, the most valuable parts of the organization, which is the confidence of the consumer. And so with that, the CISO role is all of those things. But is definitely no longer just a technical role.
Well said, Stephen. Final comments from you, Vijay.
Yashwendra, in the new normal, two functions that have become extremely critical to most organizations is the CHRO and the CISO, right? And CISO, obviously, in banking, in financial sectors, CISO always had a pride of place. They had a position, they had responsibility, and it's been so for some time, right? But where the business is looking at to the CISOs is enabling these new channels to reach out to consumers, breaking these barriers of what the technology can provide and what is secure. So in this world of many clouds, multi-clouds, whatever you may call it, where with people and consumers being dispersed across the planet, it is the CISOs who are looked upon to sort of lead a path which is safe and secure, right? So very few roles as important as a CISO at this point of time, and it will continue to be so, especially so in the banking and the financial services sector.
Well, that's all we have time for. The bottom line of today's discussion is that the pandemic presents an opportunity for full-blown innovation, a dramatic shift in perspective and adoption of safe and resilient operating processes. As the COVID-19 dust settles, CISOs will have to proactively prepare for future crises. The intensity and emphasis an organization brings to its cybersecurity strategy will determine how relevant it will be in the times to come. Thank you, panelists, for those wonderful insights, and thank you, viewers, for watching us. Stay safe and have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you, panelists, for those wonderful insights. So do check the agenda to find out the interesting lineup ahead for tomorrow and day after. See you on the other side. Stick with us.